In a word, it's chaos.
You'll have to see it to believe it. Whoever said that must have been talking about Talladega. It's a place where chaos mixes with speed, where a town turns into a city, and a weekend becomes a lifetime of memories. It's a tradition like no other.
What a wild finish.
And a track like no other. And after it's all over, you still don't believe it ever happened. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover, glad to welcome you back to the CTSN studios, and welcome to this Thursday edition as we are just 2 days away from the start of the 2022 Alabama football season. We'll start to go through what's coming up on the show as we'll take a look at our headlines thanks to our friends at RJ Young. They are the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They give us a smart board, and we'll go through all the different headlines for today. First things first, coming up on the show, we will hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he held his Wednesday press conference, the final time he meets with the media, getting ready for this weekend's game against Utah State. Then we'll have a one-on-one conversation with Will Anderson Jr. We talked with Bryce Young on our Tuesday show, and that conversation is available on demand on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, plus the Alabama Insider podcast. Now it's time to go to the other side of the football and talk with Will Anderson Jr. He's really excited. You're going to hear that early on in this conversation about how ready he is for Saturday against Utah State. Then we'll be talking with Chris Stewart, who of course is filling in for Eli Gold on play-by-play here on the radio on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, also filling in for Eli on Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. So Chris will be with us each Thursday to preview the show that's coming up tonight from Baumhauer's Victory Grill at 6:30. Then we'll take a big picture look at Alabama football in our final segment with Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News and get his thoughts on the depth chart that was released earlier this week, plus what we learned from preseason camp for the Crimson Tide. Going through our headlines for today, Crimson Tide football team, of course, starting the season against Utah State. Saturday, 6:30 start time. Our radio coverage will begin at 3:30 across the network as Alabama meets Utah State for the third time in history. Alabama won previous meetings in 2004 and 2005, and the Crimson Tide have typically gotten off to a very strong start. If you look at the Saban era, a perfect 15-0, and also win here at Bryant-Denny Stadium to begin the season. 20 straight home opening victories for the Crimson Tide, so we certainly hope those trends continue. Looking at Alabama soccer after a huge weekend of picking up wins against Southern Miss and especially last Sunday knocking off number 18 Clemson, Crimson Tide are on the road after enjoying their time in Tuscaloosa, but it's 3 games coming up in Utah. First against number 6 BYU tonight at 8 p.m. as BYU last year knocked Alabama out of the 2021 NCAA tournament in the second round. And then the Cougars advanced all the way to the national championship game where they were defeated by Florida State for the 2021 national championship. And once again, BYU a strong squad. Once again, Alabama a really strong squad. All the players that played against BYU are back on the roster for the Crimson Tide this season. The trip continues with a matchup at Utah, Pac-12 Power coming up on Sunday at 7, and then Tuesday the trip will wrap up against Utah Valley, a team that's played here in Tuscaloosa before. So that's a very difficult trip coming up for Alabama. Some other news around Crimson Tide athletics. There's a lot that is new for 2022 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Full details available at RolledTide.com. For instance, the sale of beer and wine. If you have any questions about that, it's available on RolledTide.com, and also Bryant-Denny Stadium, now cashless inside the stadium. There's some mobile ordering for concessions. All those details can be found online, RolledTide.com. And also, make sure you download your tickets now. Download your parking now. That will help you even more on Saturday, making sure you have those in your Google or Apple wallets ready to go for Alabama football. Cross country is getting ready to start this season, and we got great news from the Southeastern Conference. Both squads, the men's and the women's team, ranked preseason number 1. So we certainly like seeing that for Dan Waters and the cross country program. We wish them all the best as they begin the season. And of course, tomorrow, wear crimson. It is College Colors Day. You can wear crimson or white, but I know most of you will have on your crimson as you get ready for the college football season to begin. Tomorrow will be College Colors Day. Make sure you share those pictures with us on our social media account. Go to the Crimson Tide Sports Network on Facebook as well as on Twitter, and make sure you share your pictures of you in your College Colors Day gear wearing your crimson, supporting the Alabama Crimson Tide. As we start this show, Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR, and this Thursday we'll hear first from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he met with the media last night after Alabama's Wednesday practice, getting ready for Utah State.
Well, you know, we always played neutral site games in the past because of scheduling issues, and was a great experience for fans for, a long time, and we always were able to get a really good opponent to play, but, we kind of changed philosophies and trying to get home and home games so that we could play really good opponents, home and away. We think that Utah State is a good opponent, and it's great to always play at home. I know the players look forward to it. I think one of the things you got to realize about playing at home, it's not about playing at home. It's not the crowd. It's not anybody else that's going to help you play good. It's still about what you do, how you need to play, how you need to go out there and execute. So I know the players are always excited about playing in Bryant-Denny Stadium. We're always excited about it, and hopefully this game helps us see where we are so that we can make the improvements we need to make throughout the season to be the best team we can be. Well, I think one of the big things about first games and playing a team like this team create a lot of negative plays. They do a really good job of stunning and pressuring. That's been kind of their forte. They were one of the leading teams in the country last year in tackles for loss and creating negative plays. So you got to be patient. And I think when you get a hat on the hat, you've got a really good chance to make plays against them, but that's always the challenge. And they've got good players. They play hard. They're physical. They're tough. So I think our guys are, anxious and ready to go and, see how we go out and execute against, what we think is a pretty good defensive team. Well, we got a lot of new receivers, and I think coaches have done a really good job of, putting these guys in positions and repping what we're going to do so that, Bryce feels comfortable, but they feel comfortable and people are on the same page relative to the routes that we run, the reads that we make, and where the ball's going to go. So I think anytime a player has a year under his belt, he's going to feel more comfortable. I think he's really comfortable in, setting the protections, understanding what the defense is going to do, recognizing what they're going to do. I think he gained a lot of experience doing that last year. He handled it really well last year, so, but I think he's even more comfortable with it this year.
The head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban. Of course, you're watching Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, and the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs are returning to Talladega this fall. Don't miss out on the opportunity to see defending champ Bubba Wallace as he takes to the track on Sunday, October 2nd. Tickets are on sale now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com. Can't make it out to the track? Watch the race on NBC at 1 p.m. Central on October 2nd. So we continue on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. We're going to be having one-on-one conversations with Crimson Tide football players all throughout this season. On Tuesday's episode, we were joined by the quarterback of the Crimson Tide, Bryce Young, and now it's linebacker Will Anderson Jr. joining us as he talks about his excitement that the season is finally here. And it is game week. You fired up for Utah State?
Yes, sir, I am. It's been a long off season, and the guys have been preparing really hard, and we're excited for Saturday.
What's your preparation been like the last few weeks? Have you been full speed the entire time?
Yes, of course. We've been full speed. Coaches slowed it down just a little bit so everybody can get the mechanics and see the things that Utah State have done. But, practice has been fun. It's been hard, but we're just ready for Saturday. Yeah,
you mentioned Utah State. They beat UConn this past Saturday. What did you notice when you watched them on film?
They go really fast. They're a really good team. They have a really big offensive lineman. Their running back is really well. So, we just have to continue to prepare and, watch film and get ready for them this Saturday.
Let's talk about the Alabama defense for a moment, starting with the defensive line. Where'd you see those guys take some steps forward this camp?
Those guys have been doing a really great job. They communicated really well. I think they have a great understanding of the playbook and, what their job is to do. So I think I've seen strides in that, and they've been doing a really good job of pushing the pocket and pass rush. So it's been great, and that's how those guys have been doing a great job.
And then how about you and some of your fellow linebackers? Who specifically has really stepped up?
We all have been doing a great job. Everybody in that room has been doing a great job. Chris Braswell, Dallas Turner, Q Robinson, all those guys have really stepped up big time and learned the playbook and are ready to help this team.
And what about the secondary? Looking at the cornerbacks as well.
Well, that's not, I can't really tell you guys, who will be starting. I don't know. That's for the coaches. But, all those guys have been doing a really good job, working hard, coming to work every day, coming to practice, and, trying to get better and compete. So it's been great.
Of course, you're one of the leaders of this team. You're on the leadership council. How strong has the leadership been going into game week?
Oh, it's been so much easier this year. The guys have been very, receptive of what we've been trying to tell them, and they bought into the system. Everybody's been committed, and just to have preparation for this week to be like any other game, we expect it to be that. But the guys have been doing a really good job.
You like getting to begin the season at home at Bryant-Denny Stadium? First time that's happened in a long time.
You know, it's very exciting to have the first home game here at Bryant-Denny Stadium. We're looking for full capacity, but it's been great. I know we was talking about like our first game at home. It's going to be very exciting to watch.
We're excited to watch you. Will Anderson Jr., thank you for joining us. Roll Tide.
Thank you, and Roll Tide.
You'll have to see it to believe it. Whoever said that must have been talking about Talladega. It's a place where chaos mixes with speed, where a town turns into a city, and a weekend becomes a lifetime of memories. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Welcome back to Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Thanks to Will Anderson Jr. for joining us, as we'll again be visited by two players each week, all throughout Crimson Drive here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Coming up later tonight on the network, it is the return of Hey Coach and the Nick Saban shows. We've had a few shows over the last few weeks to start getting ready for the football season, but things change a little bit once we get to game week and once we know that head coach Nick Saban will be at Baumhower's Victory Grill to join Chris Stewart and tonight's media guest Chase Goodbread from the Tuscaloosa News. So it's a very exciting time knowing that Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show are back once again, 6:30 at Baumhower's Victory Grill, and here to preview Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show, the host of the show, Chris Stewart. First of all, Chris, it's great to see you. Roll Tide. How are game week preparations going for you as we get ready for Thursday and Saturday?
Yeah, Roll Tide to you, Roger. And, it's just bizarre. We miss Eli. We miss having him on. I know he would normally be in this spot with you, but the fact that it's a NASCAR deal, I feel really ill-equipped to take his place on anything, but especially something that's sponsored by NASCAR. Will do my best. Just trying to get ready for that first game on the weekend, just as you are, and excited about seeing the Tide in action, as well as visiting with Coach in person, not for the first time, but for the first time in game week when we do Hey Coach on Thursday night.
I got to start here. Your favorite all-time NASCAR driver, either when you were a kid or you're watching the sport at any time. Who was your favorite?
Right.
What was your favorite car?
So I grew up on the western side of town, western side of Birmingham in Fairfield. And to help you with progression from downtown, you would go, there are a couple of communities in between, but you'd go Birmingham, Fairfield, Hueytown. If you're coming to Tuscaloosa, you see that exit. Well, the Alabama gang was there. Of course, the Allisons, Neil Bonnet, Red Farmer, legends from back in the day. But for me, my first job was for WBYE radio in Calera. I don't even know if it exists anymore. But Hut Strickland had a really good start to his career back in the late 80s, part of NASCAR, and he was a legendary figure in Calera and one of the first guys that I interviewed when I was working in radio, and certainly one of the first major league guys that I had a chance to interview when I was just a teenager. So it was cool to be around him a little bit and get to know him. And so Hutch right there with the guys from Hueytown that would have been among my favorites.
Glad to hear it. Well, a little bit of NASCAR talk as we get ready for Alabama football.
I've expended, by the way, that's the end of my knowledge for NASCAR. We have maxed out, and I gave you more than I thought I could in that regard.
I totally understand. Well, we'll turn to a more familiar subject, and that is Crimson Tide football. And as we mentioned, the Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show coming up on Thursday night at Baumhower's. We touched on it a little bit last week, but it's always so special when Coach Saban is there in person at the restaurant. And I know especially for the first time this season, it's always a thrill. Yeah,
looking forward to it because there will be the energy in the building unlike anything else because we're finally getting going. It'll only build as the season goes on. But while you did the very first show 2 weeks ago, I did one last week, and we had really good crowds and enthusiastic. When the man's in the house, it's got a whole different feel to it. So that'll be a lot of fun coming up on Thursday.
Who else is coming up on the show on Thursday night?
No pressure, but the other boss is there, the big boss, Greg Byrne. We'll be there to actually get us started. Look forward to visiting with Greg about a number of things that are going on, primarily the game day experience and a lot of additions to game day from a concession standpoint and also some things within the stadium itself. So Greg will bring us up to date there, as well as kind of putting a little bit of an overview of where NIL stands and its impact within athletic departments and with the program itself specifically, at Alabama. I know that from going around on the speaking tour, a lot of questions about that, which always falls back on the AD's desk, and he'll put some terms or put some things together in terms of how that works. But we'll bounce a few things around with him. Chase Goodbread from the Tuscaloosa News, the lead columnist now for them in their sports department, will be joining us as the media guest for the night as well. And that's all in the first half hour before Coach joins us at the top.
Certainly looking forward to it at Baumhower's Victory Grill starting at 6:30 on Thursday night. And of course, everybody really looking forward to the start of Crimson Tide football season against Utah State. Just as you get ready for Saturday's game, what stood out to you about Utah State? It's kind of odd that we get to have an opponent already play a game before Alabama's opener, but it was a good win for Utah State against UConn on Saturday.
It was, and I think in seeing it in part or watching it on television, but also then reading, their notes and learning a little bit more about who they are and what they've been under a really good coach in Blake Anderson. I think it's important to point out the fact that they've got a really good record under him, not just overall, but they fell behind against UConn early, and it shocked a lot of people. But that's something that they've done. I think they've had something like a 7-3 record under him, falling behind when they fall behind first. Now, look, I know there's a massive difference in UConn and Alabama. We all understand that. But I say that only to point out that should they fall behind early, they may not get as rattled as some other teams do in a similar circumstance. And I think, as many will point out, if Alabama's a bit sluggish, that, well, you got Texas the next week, maybe some of the conversation is there, and that rattled them a little bit. I think Utah State probably experienced a good bit of that, with no disrespect towards UConn. But when they've got Bama in week 2, I'm sure some of their guys, certainly in the offseason, thought very heavily about that. All of that to say, we'll see a better performance, I think, from Utah State this week than we did last week, even though their competition will be dramatically more difficult in the tie.
Number 1 Alabama against Utah State coming up on Saturday. Chris, we're looking forward to the ball game. And of course, Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, just thank you for joining us this week on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, as we get ready for the season to begin. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, Roger. Thanks so much.
Appreciate Chris Stewart joining us here on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Again, he's filling in for Eli tonight on Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, and also be calling Alabama against Utah State on Saturday, right back here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. It's been a really interesting show so far, with comments from Coach Saban, of course, Will Anderson Jr., now Chris Stewart, and now we will start to wrap up our interview segment of the show by visiting with Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News, now in his second year covering Alabama football. And we always like talking with either Alabama beat writers, national media personalities, and what we like to call the big picture, giving you kind of an outside look at Crimson Tide football. Even though Nick's around this program on a daily basis, still very good perspective by him on what we've learned so far about this Crimson Tide team heading into the season. How are you doing during week 1 as we gear up for Alabama against Utah State?
Doing great, Roger. It's kind of that back to school week, if you will, for those of us in the sports media profession. Obviously, school's been going on for a few weeks now for people who are actually in school, but for us, it's kind of like, hey, we're back, we're off and rolling, getting kind of back into that routine. And I'm just excited for some football. I don't know about you, but I've gotten to a point of, hey, we've talked about this team up and down. We've made predictions. We've tried to figure out what they're going to be like. Let's play some football. I'm just excited to finally get to that.
What do you feel like we learned about this team throughout the month of August?
I mean, simply put, this is a team that has a lot of potential because of the senior leadership they have, the leadership that they have overall. I mean, Bryce Young and Will Anderson aren't even seniors, really. But you look at that, like the defense, they're seniors and leaders at every level. And I think that leadership is really helping this group out early on. And I think, frankly, we've learned too that, hey, this team, this is halftime right now for a lot of the guys on this team. This is really beginning the second half, because last season, rebuilding year, not rebuilding year. I think it was one of those things where, hey, you got your core coming back. A lot of these really talented players are coming back. Of course, they did lose some talented guys to the draft, but for the most part, that loss to Georgia in the national championship was kind of okay. Obviously, it would have been nice if they could have won it for them, but they didn't, and a lot of them are coming back. So let's build on that. Let's take that hunger. And we heard about the participation trophy that they have in the cafeteria to remind them about that loss. And so clearly they're trying to build on that. And I think, again, this is a scary Alabama team because they're hungry and that they have that motivation. Even Nick Saban has talked about, ideally, he'd like teams to be motivated no matter what has happened in the past. But he admits it's easier when a team is kind of coming off a loss or, trying to prove themselves coming back. So this Alabama team seems very eager to prove themselves after the way last season ended.
And then, of course, on Monday, we had Coach Saban's press conference in Tuscaloosa, as well as the release of an unofficial depth chart, but at least a 2-deep look at the Crimson Tide that fans love to dissect and figure out, okay, who's stepping up? Were there any surprises here or there? Just when you saw that depth chart for the first time, what really stood out to you?
Well, we saw a few freshmen. That was, of course, the thing to watch is, okay, who is going to be starting from the freshmen that we'd heard a lot about in preseason? Jaheim Otis at nose guard. I mean, as a co-starter, that's a big deal. I mean, kudos to him for, getting himself in shape and the weight loss. But not only that, it's one thing to lose weight. It's another thing to actually be a guy who has a chance to start as a freshman. And so I'm very interested to see him in a game. I'm also interested to see Kobe Prentice, who's listed as the starter at the slot position. Of course, Jojo Earl getting hurt probably helped open the doors some there. For him, very interested to see how he does in a game situation. But then also Cam Latu was not listed on that first depth chart. Of course, he's coming back from a minor knee injury that he suffered before, preseason camp kind of was beginning in early August. And so we're trying to figure out how soon he might be back because he's a guy who they need. I mean, they don't have much depth at that position. So the fact that he was not listed, maybe he's not a great sign, but Nick Saban did say on Monday that, he's coming back to practice. He's making progress. But if it's me, I maybe don't rush him back for Utah State, even if he is healthy, just to make sure that he's good to go. It's a long season. They need him healthy, and I think he's on that route.
Yeah, Latu and Jojo Earl, the main injuries that stand out to you from fall camp?
Yeah, I think those are the ones that draw my attention the most. I mean, of course, you had some guys who are banged up, dealing with some things here and there. Tyler Harrell had a bit of an injury, Eli Ricks, Kyrie Jackson. All guys at important positions that they're trying to figure out and kind of see who rises to the top. But, yes, Latu's injury has been the one to follow and the one I'm going to be following moving forward.
Well, the Crimson Tide are ready for week 1 against Utah State. It's so rare that Alabama is getting ready for its first game, but the team they're playing has already played a game. We saw Utah State pick up a win against UConn this past Saturday. Are we able to watch that contest and learn a little bit more about the Aggies leading into this week?
I think the biggest thing that stands out about the Aggies, I mean, this is I don't know if scrappy is the right word, but just a team that, you can't say, okay, this is not a Power 5 team, so this should be easy. I mean, Alabama should still win probably by a fairly significant margin, but they won the Mountain West last year. They're a team that, has some talented guys. And so I think it's an interesting first opponent. And again, I don't think that Utah State's going to give them too much of a run for their money, but when you have a team that comes out that has already played a game against a team that hasn't yet played a game, there could be a little bit of rust. So I would be surprised if maybe first couple series don't go perfectly for Alabama, but they very well could. You just don't know. But I think that with this Utah State team having that first game before this game is going to help them out. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for Alabama on the ground game. I don't know if we're going to see the joyless murder ball come back, so to speak. But UConn was able to run a fair amount against Utah State. And so maybe we get to see a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs and see what this running back room that has a lot of depth for Alabama, see what they can do against Utah State.
Yeah, how versatile do you feel like Jahmyr Gibbs will be in? Do you feel like he's going to be involved as well in the passing game along with running the football?
Well, that's what makes him so exciting. I mean, he has the ability to catch the ball. He can make guys miss. I mean, he can cut, one cut, next thing you know, you're grabbing an air if you're a defender kind of thing. And he's a guy who can move around. We talk about, the tight end depth. With the lack of tight ends that they maybe have who have experience or health right now, maybe you have 2 running backs in the field where you have a Jace McClellan in the backfield and you move a Jahmyr Gibbs around as that piece to kind of use as a matchup advantage, because Alabama's like to use multiple tight ends at times. But if you just don't have the guys there, maybe you don't force it. Maybe you do use the position where you are the deepest at. And so Jahmyr Gibbs is a great chess piece for Bill O'Brien to have, to basically use wherever he wants him and use that just scary speed that Jahmyr has. And I'm frankly very, very interested to see what Jahmyr Gibbs is like in this offense.
This is a question I've been asked a lot when I've done some radio appearances on some other shows, but I want to ask it to you. And when you look at the other side of the football, you have Will Anderson Jr. on one side, Dallas Turner on another. How are teams like Utah State, or frankly anybody on Alabama's schedule this year, going to deal with those 2 premier edge rushers on either side?
Well, if I had that answer, I'd probably be working for another coaching staff. Not talking to you right now, but it's a great question because, I mean, even if you try to double team Will Anderson, you aren't necessarily stopping Will Anderson. I'm very interested to see what Will can do under their new coach, Coleman Hutzler, to see that development that he brings, a new perspective. Maybe he can add a few pass rush moves. I don't really see him taking a step back. If anything, he'll take a step forward, which is scary to think about if you're an opposing offense. But yeah, I don't know how you necessarily stop it. I mean, you probably have to throw a lot of quick passes. You probably have to try to keep them moving, keep them, going sideline to sideline. But good luck. That's all I can say.
And then another note on defense, there was so much made about Eli Ricks making the decision to transfer from LSU to Alabama. He comes in with a lot of notoriety. Just what have you made of his camp to this point, and what do you feel like his contribution could be this Saturday?
Well, a couple things. One, I think people took for granted how seamless Henry Toto made it look coming from Tennessee to Alabama as a linebacker, of course, different position. But for him, he kind of knew the defensive system just because he played under Jeremy Pruitt. Whereas Eli Ricks is having to learn a new defensive system. So that already puts him a little bit behind. And if you've ever tried to study or learn what it takes to play cornerback for Alabama, I had a receiver, another SC team once tell me just how complex Alabama's coverages are. Trying to learn that, and not only learn that, but play at full speed, that can take some time. And so, I think it's one of those things for Eli. Already he has a big learning curve, and then he gets a little bit banged up in camp with a little bit of a back issue. That doesn't help. And so we might not see him be a starter right away. He might be, it's, that cornerback position is kind of the one I'm going to be watching the most on Saturday. But even if he's not contributing right away, I wouldn't rule him out necessarily just because it takes time to learn that position and play it well. But I think also we take for granted just because of what Jameson Williams and Henry Toto, guys like that, have done, that every transfer, is going to come in right away, be a stud and perform at a high level. And that might happen for some, like Jahmyr Gibbs. He very well could be that guy. But it's going to take some more. The more transfers they have, the more that they add, it's going to take some time for some of these guys. And so how fast Eli Ricks contributes, I don't know. But I'm certainly going to be watching to see what he can do.
Well, as we get ready for Alabama against Utah State in the season opener, of course, Nick Kelly will be covering the Crimson Tide for the Tuscaloosa News. And what can you tell us about the coverage we can expect in the paper this year, along with you and Chase Goodbread, who comes in as the sports columnist?
Yeah, like you said, I'm fortunate to be joined by a very talented colleague, and Chase is back on the beat. He used to be in kind of my role covering Alabama, but he's a columnist now. And yeah, all sorts of good coverage, hopefully coming throughout the year. Got a fun story this week myself coming out on Bryce Young and the first quarterbacks coach he trained with when Bryce was 5. And so it's fun to hear about what Bryce was like at age 5. And even that back then he was still really talented. So that's one story this week. Going to have all, trying to tell some good stories throughout the year, and just excited for another football season.
Well, the final question, what is the play on the chalkboard? We see it change throughout some of your appearances here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.
I mean, I probably need to put some new ones up. I actually need to put some, adjust them, and maybe I consider that 2-back set where I look to have that Jahmyr Gibbs move him around and see what we can do. So actually, it's a good reminder of all the things I'm trying to get ready. I probably need to update the chalkboard, some coming up soon.
Hey, Jahmyr Gibbs going one side, Jace McClellan going the other side out of the shotgun. We kind of like the possibilities there from an Alabama
scary to think about. Pretty scary to think about.
No doubt. Well, Nick Kelly, thank you so much for joining us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. We look forward to your coverage in the Tuscaloosa News. All the best to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Good to be with you.
Fun conversation with Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News. We mentioned Chase Goodbread as well from the T-News. He will be joining Chris Stewart as tonight's media guest on Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show. So check out their work online on the Tuscaloosa News website. And, of course, get the paper here in T-Town. We've come to one of our favorite parts of the show, Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. It is time for the Wickles Weekend Update, brought to you by Wickles Pickles. They are wickedly delicious, and you can buy them online at wickelspickles.com. Let's take a look at what's coming up across the Crimson Tide Sports Network. We're going to be very busy over the next few days as we have something for each day of the weekend, each day as we start the month of September. Of course, with today's Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show coming up tonight at 6:30. We will have, of course, a live stream of that coming up on our Facebook page, also throughout Alabama Athletics social media accounts as well. Then on Friday, we'll kind of take the best of everything we've heard this week. Best of Hey Coach, the best of Crimson Drive, and eventually Crimson Rewind as well. We put all of that into a 10 to 15 minute podcast called This Week on the CTSN podcast. It'll be available on the Alabama Insider podcast, wherever you get your podcast, and also on the Varsity Network app. So make sure you check out This Week on CTSN, a really good game preview to get ready for the game. It's coming up on Saturday, Alabama against Utah State, as the Crimson Tide begin the 2022 season. You see the kickoff time, 6:30. Our radio coverage from Bryant-Denny Stadium will begin at 3:30 coming up on Saturday, so we look forward to having you join us across radio affiliates. The Varsity Network app will have the live stream, and also the booth cam will be available once again back here on our Facebook page. Then on Sunday, we'll kind of recap the first game with the Nick Saban television show with Chris Stewart and the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban. There's also a new edition of Tide TV this week, taking a look at all Alabama sports as well. And then on Monday, it is Labor Day, but we will be having our first edition of Crimson Tide Rewind at 6 p.m. from Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills, as Corey Reamer and I will take a look back at the Utah State game and start to look ahead to the University of Texas. We're big believers in the process here. We haven't talked at all about the Longhorns on this show. First things first, Utah State is the opponent, but once we get to Rewind, we'll start looking forward to what's coming up the next week, Alabama against Texas. This is Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, and the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs are almost here. Experience unforgettable racing as the NASCAR Cup Series playoff race returns to Talladega Superspeedway on October 2nd. Lock in your tickets today at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com. Of course, we thank NASCAR for being the presenting sponsor of Crimson Drive here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Next week, we'll have this show coming up for you twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday, to give you the very latest on Alabama football. And we're really excited for football season to be here starting on Saturday night, as again, the radio broadcast will sound a little bit different coming up on Saturday. Of course, Eli Gold continues to battle some health issues, and Chris Stewart will be filling in on play-by-play coming up on Saturday and also tonight as the host of Hey Coach and the Nick Saban show, so we wish Eli all the best as he continues to recover. And also earlier this week, we learned that our sideline reporter, Rashad Johnson, is going to be leaving Alabama and part of our broadcast to go to Tampa Bay and be part of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff in the NFL. So congratulations to Rashad and his family on a very exciting new opportunity. He loves football. You could always tell that on the broadcast, and especially in our pregame visits that we would have on the radio, and of course here on Crimson Drive many times as well, recapping the Alabama season. But Rashad is really, he is just such a great football mind, and he belongs with a team, and he especially belongs back in the NFL where he had a 9-year playing career, and we're thrilled for him to have this opportunity with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Rashad stepping away as a sideline reporter. I'll kind of be trying to fill those shoes just a little bit as kind of a hybrid between being a host and also a sideline reporter coming up on Saturday. But we certainly wish Rashad all the best. We hope Eli continues to recover and can join us as quickly as possible. But that's just a couple of the changes we will have here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network coming up for Saturday. But we've really enjoyed this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Huge thank you to our guest, Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News, obviously Chris Stewart, as well as Will Anderson Jr., and we started the show with comments from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban. Thanks as well to our producer, Ethan Carabin, the busiest man in show business. He is going to be producing our booth cam coming up on Saturday as well. A really fun look at Alabama football is the booth cam. I know a lot of you like to get active in the comments throughout the game, and we want to make sure you come back on Saturday for that experience. The booth cam is up and running once again for home and road games for the Crimson Tide throughout this season. For everybody with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover signing off on this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Enjoy your Friday. We'll talk to you at Saturday from Bryant-Denny Stadium. Roll Tide, everyone.